Hi, I'm Bridger Fates with UW Extension. A lot of times farms and ranches have to make capital investments that take a while to pay off over time. And, often the big question is, will this capital investment pay off over time? Well, one example that we might think about is a center pivot, a common thing that ranchers invest in or farmers invest in. And so, how do we know whether this center pivot's going to pay off over time? Well, the Wyoming Ranch Tools has a tool to help us do that. It's called the Net Present Value Tool, or NPV. This allows us to enter in the capital investment required to purchase a center pivot and estimate the years it would take to break even on that investment. Let's go to that calculator now and take a look at this center pivot example.
There are three different calculators on the net present value tool. There's this constant cost and returns, which assumes that each year your costs are going to be the same and your revenue is going to be the same. There's also a variable cost and returns calculator. So in this, you can adjust the annual cost and revenue each year over the 15-year period. And then the last one is this econo range, which looks at range investments. And we will have another video on this econo range tool coming up next in this series. So let's go back to the constant returns and think about the possibility of investing in a center pivot. So, that's certainly a common thing that folks ask is, can I invest in a center pivot? Will that pay off? Especially with cost share opportunities, looking at those. So in this example, if our per acre cost of our pivot is $1,500, that's our cost, assuming that there may be some cost share in there to help with that. But if your cost is $1,500 an acre, you would enter that here in the investment. Then you would enter an interest rate here. You can think about this interest rate in a couple of different ways. One, if you're having to get a loan, certainly you would start with that as the interest rate. You can also think about it somewhat in terms of a way to manage risk. So if the investment you're looking at investing in has a lot of risk associated with it, you might use whatever interest you are paying, but also add additional to this rate to account for risk. So a risky investment may be you would use a 10% interest rate instead of this 5% interest rate. Certainly at the time we're making this video, interest rates are climbing. And so, you have to take into account those things as well. So the next thing that you enter, you need to figure out what your annual costs are going to be to run your center pivot. In this example, they're $300 an acre. And then figure out what the revenue will be on that center pivot. How much hay are you going to, how much additional hay will you get on this acreage? So if you were moving from flood irrigation to center pivot, or from side rolls or other types of irrigation to center pivot, estimate the additional hay that you would produce from that center pivot and assign that value. So in this example, we said $520 an acre. So if this would be your cost, and again, you'll have to enter your costs in each of these categories to be accurate for you. After 5 years, our net present value would be negative $499 per acre. So, even though they were making that extra $520 per acre a year, we wouldn't pay it off until the 9th year. So our break-even year is year 9. And if we look at a 10-year net present value on this pivot, that would be, we would be a positive $283.72 per acre by making this investment. And if you look over a 15-year period, that could be as high as $897 per acre positive by making this investment. So that's how this net present value calculator works. Fairly simple in terms of how the calculator works. The challenge is, being accurate on what your annual cost could be. And in this example, with a center pivot, you want to make sure you include both your fuel and those sorts of things, but also an annual cost per acre for maintenance to keep that center pivot running over the long period of time. So, be aware of some of those things that you need to calculate as you enter in those numbers. But that's the net present value tool. It's a great tool if you're looking at making an investment on a ranch or a farm. And hope you find this tool useful, and hope you'll join us for our other tools and calculators on this YouTube series. With that, thank you.